The first siren was a thin, embarrassed whine from a speaker that had never expected to be used. It skittered across the morning fields, over rows of maize and salt grass, through the low white houses of Arrivo's 3, and into the control tower where Elara Myles stood with a mug she no longer remembered setting down. "Confirm," she said. The tower's AI was a budget model with a pleasant, apologetic voice. "Contact solution confirmed. 12 heat signatures on approach. Configuration: Zhar Dominion rating flotilla. Estimated time to atmospheric entry: 4 minutes." The mug rattled against the console. Elara set it aside and wiped her hand on her vest. She looked through the tower's glass at the landscape she had chosen 3 years ago when she left the fleet, the quilt of fields, the distant hills cupping a shallow lake, the community green where children played ball in the evenings. She had come here to be nothing, a systems manager for irrigation pumps and weather towers. Now the sky above the lake was scarring open, lines of red fire cutting across thin clouds as the raiders burned in. "Patch me to all channels," she said. "All channels open," the AI replied. "Arrivos, listen." Her voice went farther than her legs ever could. "This is Elara. We are under attack by the Zhar Dominion. There is no time for panic. You'll do exactly as I say, and most of us will live. I promise you that." Somewhere below, a baby cried, then fell silent. She heard her own breath, felt the white hum of fear become a narrow rail she could balance on. "Javi," she said. "You in the drone shed?" "I'm here," came the reply. The kid sounded young even over static. "But the agri-swarm isn't. We never sync them for aerial maneuvers. They only have soil sensors and cutter modules." I don't." "They'll fly," Elara said. "They're lighter than air when you strip the cargo racks. Get them into the mesh. I'll push the firmware override." "But, Javi, now!" A beat. "Yes, ma'am." She closed the broadcast and let her shoulders drop for half a second. The old habits came back like a long-denied oxygen intake. Assess. Prioritize. Convert liabilities into assets. Arrivos had no guns. It had a patchwork comms grid, hundreds of farm drones, 3 atmosphere stabilizers, a weather tower, a water plant, and a population of people who trusted her to keep the lights on and the storms tame. "AI, bring up their lead ship," she said. A projection bloomed above the console, a spear-shaped raider with overlapping shields and wing-mounted plasma arrays. A name scrolled in Zhar glyphs, transliterated into human characters: Vraxel. The commander's seal pulsed in crimson. In the fleet, this had been a routine recognition drill. Here, it was a sentence. "Patch their hailing frequency to me," Elara said. Static, then a voice that rumbled like a drumhead. "Human settlement, transmit your surrender code. Kneel on your green squares. Await boarding. Resistance will be corrected. Commander of the Vraxel," Elara said, tone even. "This is Captain Elara Myles, Arrivo's Systems. You've made a navigational error. This is registered assembly territory. Cut your burn and break off before you violate treaty space." Laughter clattered through the channel. "A farmer answers me with treaties." "An engineer," Elara said. "Who knows what happens to ships when they misread a storm?" Silence, then a curt click of disconnect. They weren't interested in conversation. Good. She didn't have time for it either. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's make a storm." She swept the control surfaces open. The atmosphere stabilizers sat in a triangle around the settlement like 3 metal teeth. Their job was to counter thermal spikes and keep dust from choking the air during the hot months. They also had capacitors big enough to shame small warships. She'd serviced those capacitors 100 times. She knew how far they would bend before they screamed. "AI, Reroute stabilizer control to local. Authorization Myles Garnet 7. Reroute complete. Alarms bloomed on the boards. Red, then amber as she killed safeties. Charge rates climbed. Outside, the first shadow crossed the fields as a raider slid overhead, and the thin wheat bowed under its shockwave. A column of dust rose and fell. "Mom?" A woman's voice came over the local band, breathless. "They're telling us to go to the shelters, but the hatch on North 2 is jammed." "I'll get it," Elara said. "Send whoever is closest with a pry bar. Put the kids in the root cellar on East Row 3. Len, you've trained for this. You'll be all right." "Yes, Captain." She swallowed. She had told them not to call her that. The day she arrived, she had sworn to be a field tech and a neighbor and nothing else. The title curled around her now like an old coat. "Javi," she said, switching back. "Status." "Swarm is up," he said, wonder drowning his fear. 243 units, stripped and linked. We had to rip off half the racks. They look naked. Good. Send them to altitude 200 meters, grid Alpha Delta. Load flare packets. And Javi, replace their soil sensors with the silvered mylar from the seed vault. You want reflective foil on the noses? I want mirrors, Elara said. Lots of them. He didn't ask why. The best people didn't, not when the clock was bleeding. The first strike came on the far side of the lake, a white spear of plasma that boiled water to steam and turned shoreline reeds into black lace. A second lance hit a storage barn. The roof blew up in a square, then fell in slow motion, like a card house reaching humility. The siren's embarrassed whine became a howl. "Open the fire breaks," Elara said. "Flood the south fields." "Won't that shock the irrigation mains?" the eye asked. "It will," Elara said. "That's the point." She used the weather tower to seed a column of superheated air, guiding it with the stabilizers. Steam rose from the flooded fields as the cool water met hot soil. In seconds, a rolling fog boiled up and spread, a gray lake flowing above the real one. Thermal scans from orbit would get messy. Plasma strikes would bloom and dissipate in the fog, losing coherence. The raiders would have to drop lower, where surprises waited. "Broadcast again," she said. "All channels open. This is Elara. Team North, get to the atmosphere node and pull the blue shunts. Don't touch the red, those will kill you. Team South, run the power from the irrigation pumps into the spare bus. Yes, you're going to trip breakers. Reset them manually. Javi's crew, once the swarm is at 200 meters, set their flares to detonate on my mark. Families, into shelters now. If a shelter hatch is stuck, you break it. If you can't break it, you call me, and I will tell you how. Move." Her own heartbeat slowed, as the colony's heartbeat found a rhythm. She watched the raiders spread into a search grid, confident, methodical. The Vraxel hung high, observing. She pictured the commander watching through a crystal dome, amused. Humans, to him, were livestock that had learned a few party tricks. "Commander," she said on the private band, "you're drifting too low on Vector 3. There's an updraft you didn't account for." No answer. But the Vraxel adjusted, fractional, as if some part of him couldn't resist a warning. "Good. Reach for the rope." "I'll tug." The drone swarm reached altitude, a flock of matte shapes against the thinning blue. Through their cameras she saw reflections of sky and sea shivering in the mylar noses. Elara patched herself into their mesh, and felt a rush as 1,000 small eyes opened to her. "Javi," she said, "you're about to blind a fleet. On your mark." He breathed. She waited until the raiders angled in for their first low run. "Mark." The drones popped their flares and threw light. Not heat. Light, bright enough to spawn ghost suns. The mylar noses turned those flares into a packed cloud of brilliance that burst and scattered, then recombined as the swarm wove. The Raiders' optical guidance systems read 1,000 false horizons. A wing dipped, overcorrected, clipped a field tower, and spiraled away trailing fire. "Who taught you that?" Javi asked, voice ragged with amazed laughter. "A pilot who didn't like dying," Elara said. The next move cost them. A plasma stripe cracked the eastern stabilizer housing and sent shards skipping across the fields. The capacitors whined inside the tower with a pitch that ran needles through her teeth. She had pushed them too hard too fast, and they were telling her so. "Hold together," she whispered. "Captain," Lynn said on local, breathless and low. "North 2 shelter open. We're in." "Good," Elara said. "Stay quiet. Listen to me, and don't try to be brave. We're farmers," Lynn said. "We don't know how not to be brave." Static hissed over the Raider band, then the drumhead voice returned, slow with irritation. "Human, you are wasting assets. Stand down, or I will take your fields apart seed by seed." Elara patched him into the public channel so everyone could hear. "Commander, this is a registered colony. You're broadcasting threats on an assembly frequency. Maybe you want to turn off your recorder." A pause. Then, "You think law protects you?" "No," Elara said. "I think physics does." She cut him off and redirected power. The irrigation mains were live now, a lattice of water and copper under the fields. If a landing skiff's skids touched down in the wrong place, the colony's gentle heartbeat would become a spike through its hull. She gave the AI a set of conditions to watch for: downforce, touchdown, grounding. The AI read them back with troublingly cheerful efficiency. "Harvester crews," she said, "move your tractors to the southern ridge. Line them up nose to nose. If you see a craft descending, aim for its intakes and don't stop until I say. Your rigs are insured. Your lives are not." "Copy," came a chorus, old men, young women, someone with a cough. The first skiff broke through the fog, its black belly shining with heat shimmer. It angled for a clear patch between irrigation ditches, landing gear unfolding like the legs of a steel insect. The mains beneath it hummed. The skiff touched down. The field lit, blue running over green in a sudden net. The craft shuddered and died without a sound. On the high screen, the Vraxel shifted. Even at this distance, Elara could feel the commander's frustration like static on her skin. He had come for a cull and found a puzzle box. "Javi," she said, "cycle the swarm. No patterns longer than 6 seconds. Keep the light random. I'm going to open the stabilizers. You said we'd fry ourselves if we will if I'm clumsy," she said. "I won't be." She slid the stabilizers out of their comfort, slaving them to the weather tower's telemetry. They took the planet's breath, shaped it, and exhaled hard. Hot wind swept from east to west, carving the fog into channels. She steered those channels like rivers, funneling them across the Raiders' flight paths. Air became a blade. 2 ships flew into crossing currents and pinballed. One recovered at the edge of the lake. The other kissed water and didn't rise. 7 minutes, she murmured, not sure whether she meant it as a promise or a dare. The console flashed an overload warning bright enough to paint her face. The central stabilizer's capacitors were red zoning, their safeties hanging by a thread of code. She could nurse them longer. She could also tear out the thread and hurl the whole budget of the colony's next decade into one moment of survival. "AI," she said softly, "if the central unit hits 98%, black out the tower and route me to manual. That will void multiple. Do it." On the Raider band, the commander came back, voice sharpened to a point. "Name yourself again." "Elara Myles," she said. "Systems." "You were more," he said. Once. She didn't answer. He was fishing, and she was busy. The Vraxel dipped, finally deigning to descend. Its shadow crossed the control tower, the fields, the lake, like an eclipse that had learned how to hate. Its belly plates opened, revealing the blue heart of a ship that had chewed forts for breakfast. "Javi," Elara said, "pull the swarm low. Keep them between us and its mouth." "Yes, ma'am." The capacitor screamed. The tower lights flickered. Through the glass, she could see people running with fuel canisters, yanking hoses, wrenching open panel boxes, all the choreography of a city trying to pretend it wasn't a battlefield. The Vraxel's plasma rays glowed. "Now!" Elara whispered to the stabilizers, as if they were skittish horses. "Breathe." She keyed the surge. The world went white. For a heartbeat the air itself crackled, a dry thunder that rolled across the fields and climbed the ship's shields like hands. The Vraxel's glow stuttered. A halo of static shimmered around it, then collapsed inward with a sound like a stone dropped in deep water. Every hair on Elara's arm stood up. The tower went dark. Somewhere below, a child laughed, then hushed quickly, afraid the sky would hear. Power came back stuttering. The Vraxel steadied, offended. It lowered another meter, as if to say, "You don't get to touch me." Elara leaned into the console, eyes burning. "All units," she said. "Phase 2. On the ridge, harvesters growled to life, angled their wide maws at the sky, and waited. In the fog, the drone swarm curled and flashed. Above them, the flagship dipped again, choosing to descend into the teeth of a farm. The Vraxel hovered above Arrivo's 3 like a patient predator, its belly open, its arrays simmering with blue light. The air stank of ozone and scorched earth. Elara's tower consoles flickered weakly, recovering from the overload. She braced her hands on the edge of the board, forcing herself steady. Fear wanted to shout, but fear had no place here. "Javi," she said. "Status on the swarm?" "Still flying, still flashing." His voice crackled. He sounded exhausted, but she heard pride woven through it. "But their batteries weren't meant for this. We'll be dry in 10 minutes. 7 is all we need," Elara replied. She closed her eyes briefly, visualizing the field like a chessboard. The Dominion had numbers, firepower, armor. Arrivo's had air, water, dirt, and stubborn humans who refused to kneel. If she played every element together, maybe, just maybe, they could cut the Dominion down to size. The Vraxel's commander came through again, his voice sharp. "Human, you've embarrassed yourself enough. You are not soldiers. You are vermin scratching at boots. Watch as I burn your harvest, then your homes." Elara patched him to the colony channel again. She wanted every villager to hear. "Commander Threx," she said evenly, "you talk too much. Maybe your ships would do better without you." A low growl of static came back. Then silence. She leaned over the console. "AI, expand field flood to Zone 3. Keep pumps running until failure. Pumps will overload in 20 minutes. They only need to live for 5. Below, massive irrigation valves cranked open. Water gushed into the ditches, spilling across tilled soil. Muddy rivers formed in straight lines, cutting through the colony grid. Farmers watched from the ridges, tools in hand, while their fields drowned. They didn't complain. They knew what was at stake. "Lynn," Elara said on the local channel, "you and your crew ready with the stabilizer relays?" "We're here," Lynn said, breathless. "Blue shunt's connected. The thing is humming like it's alive." "Hold position," Elara said. "When I give the word, you dump the charge straight into the southern mains. And you run when you hear the scream? You understand?" "Yes, Captain." She hated that word, but she didn't correct it this time. The first wave of Dominion skiffs descended, small black shapes cutting through the fog, searchlights sweeping. They were hunting for civilians, searching for pens to fill. Elara tracked them across the screens. "Harvester crews," she said. "Targets inbound. Wait for them to lock intakes." The harvesters were giants of the colony, machines with broad rotary mouths designed to chew crops by the hectare. Farmers sat inside them now, white-knuckled on the controls, their rigs lined up nose to nose along the ridge. The skiffs descended into range, their intakes glowing faint orange. "Now!" Elara snapped. Engines roared. The harvesters spat metal, rocks, and broken plow pieces into the air, a crude rail launcher barrage. The first skiff took a turbine-sized rock into its intake. It shrieked, tumbled sideways, and plowed into a field in a blossom of dirt and smoke. The second pulled up hard, dodging, but steam from the flooded ditches blinded it. It struck the ground nose first and folded like paper. The farmers cheered once, ragged, before cutting back to silence. "Nice shot," Avi whispered into the channel. "They're still coming," Elara said. "Save your voices." In orbit, the Dominion fleet adjusted. Threx's voice returned, dripping venom. "You think breaking toys makes you warriors? I'll show you war." Dozens of plasma bolts rained down, slicing through fog. They burned barns, scorched fields, left glass where we had grown. Villagers cried out in their shelters. Elara gritted her teeth. This was the cost, sacrifice of earth so flesh might endure. She tapped the relay board. "Lynn now!" The southern stabilizer roared to life. Energy pulsed down the irrigation mains. The flooded fields flashed bright blue as currents surged through water and mud. The nearest Dominion skiffs, low enough to graze the surface, jolted violently. Sparks burst from their undercarriages. One fell straight into the electrified mire, vanishing in steam and crackling arcs. "Confirmed strike," Len reported, voice shaking. Another roar echoed across the valley, this time human voices, hundreds of them in shelters and ditches, shouting as one. Not panic, not fear, but defiance. Elara allowed herself a moment to look out the tower window. Beyond the smoke, she saw children pressed against shelter glass, watching their parents fight. She saw grandmothers lifting fuel tanks, running hoses into makeshift launchers. She saw faces pale with fear, but eyes blazing. The colony wasn't breaking. It was hardening. "Commander Threx," she said on the open line, "your men are dying in mud. How does that feel?" Static. Then laughter. Harsh, brittle. "You're clever. Too clever for a farmer. You were fleet, weren't you? I remember your kind, hiding behind tactics because you can't match strength. When my flagship descends, your tricks will end. Come down," Elara said. "Let's see." The swarm was flagging. Mylar noses fluttered, flares dimmed. Javi's voice cut in. "Captain, I've got about 40 drones still live. The rest are dead weight. What do you want me to do?" "Bring them down low," Elara said. "Circle the Vraxel's ventral array. Make it chase ghosts." "Copy." "And Captain?" "Yes. I don't think I've ever been this scared in my life." "That's good," Elara said quietly. "It means you're still alive. Stay that way." The Vraxel moved now. Its great bulk lowered, darkening the fog. Every plate hummed with power. Elara watched its readings climb. Shields at maximum, plasma banks spooling. Threx had decided to make this personal. She whispered to herself. 7 minutes. AI, status of capacitor charge on node 1? 92% and climbing. Projected overload in 4 minutes. Hold it. Tell me when it hits 97. Yes, Captain. She keyed the colony channel. This is Elara. Listen carefully. If you're not fighting, you stay hidden. If you are fighting, you don't stop until I call retreat. They think we're weak. Show them otherwise. Silence. Then, one by one, voices came back. Farmers, children, engineers, teachers. Copy. Understood. For Revos. She felt something surge through her chest. Not courage, not pride. Something older. Humanity's refusal to kneel. The Dominion tried again. Skiffs dropped soldiers in black armor onto ridges. They advanced through smoke with rifles blazing. But colonists were waiting. They pulled fuel hoses, lit crude charges, and sent fire roaring into the fog. The alien troops faltered, blinded and coughing. A grandmother with arms like ropes swung a wrench into the lead soldier's visor. He went down. In the tower, Elara saw it all on grainy feet. She closed her fist and whispered, "Good." Then the capacitor screamed. "Node 1 at 97%, the eye said. Elara took a deep breath. "Route power to the stabilizer net. Strip safeties. Warning, this action risks total collapse of atmospheric balance. Do it." She gripped the manual lever. Outside, the Vraxel's belly glowed brighter, preparing its full strike. "Lynn," she said, "get clear. We're already running." "Good." She yanked the lever. The stabilizer sang like struck bells. The air above the colony convulsed. Steam, dust, and ozone fused into a boiling wall. Lightning snapped out of a clear sky, striking across the Vraxel's shields. Its plasma bank stuttered. For one brief, searing moment, the Dominion's flagship looked mortal. Javi gasped over comms. "You hit them! You actually hit them!" Elara's voice was steady. "Not enough. But it will be." The Vraxel wobbled, then steadied, fury burning in its engines. It dipped lower, daring her to try again. Elara watched the readings on her console climb past red. Her people were still standing. The Dominion was bleeding. And the battle wasn't finished. She pressed her hand flat against the console and whispered to herself, 7 minutes. The war had just begun. The Vraxel filled the sky, a leviathan dragging its shadow across fields and shelters alike. Its shields glowed with a simmering haze, patchy in places where lightning had scored them. Beneath its hull, plasma banks flared, ready to erase the colony in a single breath. Elara stood in the tower, sweat running down her spine, one hand flat against the trembling console. Every capacitor was bleeding red warnings. The colony grid was a patchwork of shorted circuits and flickering feeds. The drones, few that remained, circled the Vraxel like gnats around a predator. Javi's voice cracked over the comms. "Captain, they're spooling for a full discharge. We can't take that." "I know." Elara kept her tone even. "That's why we'll hit them first." She switched to the colony-wide band. "Listen to me. This is the last push. Tractor crews, angle for the flagship's intakes. Every scrap of metal you can fire, you fire. Stabilizer teams, stand by for overload. This is going to end in minutes, one way or another." Her words sank into the silence. Then voices came back, steady and certain. "Copy." "Understood." For Revos. The colony wasn't afraid anymore. They were furious. On the horizon, the harvesters moved into position. Massive wheels churned through mud, their rotary mouths primed with jagged debris, rocks, twisted plow frames, shattered drone parts. Farmers hunched inside cabins, pale but resolved. "On my mark," Elara said. The Vraxel dipped lower, its belly plates unfolding like the maw of a beast. A roar built inside it, the sound of energy gathering. "Mark!" The harvesters fired. Shards of metal and stone hurled skyward, ripping through fog. The first volley hammered into the Vraxel's ventral shielding. Sparks burst. The second volley followed immediately, slamming into a weakening panel near its engine array. A massive chunk of harvester blade struck true, embedding itself where shield shimmer faltered. The Vraxel lurched. Its glow faltered, then flared back, angrier than before. Threx's voice bellowed across the channel, stripped of calm arrogance. "You dare strike the Dominion's flagship? I will salt your soil with fire until nothing grows." Elara patched herself in. 7 minutes, Commander. That's all it takes to break a bully. Your defiance ends now. No, Elara said. Yours does. She keyed the stabilizers. The capacitor screamed. AI, confirm overload threshold. 99%. Catastrophic failure imminent. Route every joule into the atmospheric net, Elara ordered. Warning, this will destabilize local climate for. Do it. The tower shuddered. Outside, the sky twisted. Clouds convulsed as the stabilizers vented everything they had stored. Heat surged into cold fronts, ripping the air into a chain reaction. Lightning snapped in jagged webs. Thunder rolled like an artillery barrage. The Vraxel shields blazed under the onslaught, then began to fracture. Cracks of light spidered across their surface. Alara's hand shook as she forced the stabilizers past limits no manual had ever allowed. Javi whispered over comms, awed and terrified. You're tearing the sky apart. Yes, Elara said. And it's going to tear them with it. The drones made their last run. 40 battered units dived at the flagship, flares burning. They weren't weapons, but they were distractions. Bright bursts of light strobed across the Vraxel's targeting sensors, scattering its aim. Plasma fire missed wide, gouging fields instead of homes. Go, little ones, Elara murmured. A volley of lightning struck the Vraxel's exposed engine. The embedded harvester blade acted as a conductor. The engine bay erupted in a spray of molten fire. The flagship staggered. For the first time, the Predator looked clumsy. Lin, Elara snapped. Final surge. Dump every reserve into the mains. Captain, if we do that. Do it! A hum spread through the earth. Water-filled ditches glowed faint blue as the last reserves of power poured through. The charge climbed into the air, enveloping the Dominion troops still scattered across the ridges. Their armor lit like lanterns before collapsing into silence. The Vraxel groaned as if the planet itself had latched onto it. Its hull warped under the assault. Shields flickered, then collapsed entirely. Now! Elara shouted. Harvesters, one more volley! Every remaining rig spat debris skyward. Scraps slammed into naked alloy. Panels buckled. The flagship reeled, venting fire and smoke. Threx's voice returned, ragged with fury. This is not victory. This is theft. You stole 7 minutes from me. But I will return. Elara leaned over the console, her voice cold as stone. You'll remember those 7 minutes every time you see Earth on your charts. You'll remember what happens when you underestimate us. The Vraxel's engines roared, but not in triumph. They were retreating, limping upward, trailing fire. The surviving skiffs scrambled after it, abandoning their dead. The Dominion fleet broke formation and turned for the void. In exactly 7 minutes, since Alara's first counterstrike, Arrivos was still standing. The tower went quiet. The stabilizer shut down with a final gasp. The consoles dimmed to black. Elara stood very still, letting the silence spread. Her ears rang from the storm. Her chest felt hollow. Then, faintly, voices began to rise across the comms. Farmers cheering, children crying, technicians laughing with disbelief. They're leaving! We're alive! We did it! Elara exhaled and finally let her shoulders sag. Javi broke in, voice trembling. Captain, we won. Elara's lips curved, just slightly. No, Javi. We survived. That's different. But survival's enough for today. She looked out the tower window. Smoke drifted over scorched fields. Alien wreckage smoldered in the mud. Children peeked from shelters, their eyes wide at the sight of blackened skiffs lying broken among their crops. Farmers stood together, muddy and bruised, but unbroken. Lynn's voice came softly over the comms. "Captain, what do we do now?" Elara placed her hand on the glass, staring at the wreckage. "Now, we rebuild, and we make sure the galaxy remembers what happened here, so no one ever dares to call us weak again." A hush fell over the channel. Then, one by one, voices answered. "For Revos! For Earth! For us!" The words grew louder, swelling into a chant across the network, across the fields, echoing from ridge to ridge. For Revos! For Earth! Elara closed her eyes and let it wash over her. 7 minutes. That was all it had taken for Earth's weakest colony to break a fleet and etch itself into history. And Elara Myles knew, deep in her bones, that the Dominion would never forget.